He started to go for the coins, but I snatched them back. No service, no tip. I tried to sound braver than I felt. Charon growled again, a deep, blood-chilling sound. The spirits of the dead started pounding on the elevator doors. It's the same, too, I sighed. We had more to offer. I held up an entire bag from Krusty's stash. I took out a fistful of traumas and let the coins spill through my fingers. Charon's growl changed into something more like a lion's purr. Do you think I can be bought, godling? Just out of curiosity, how much do you got there? A lot, I said. I bet Hades doesn't even pay you well enough for such hard work. Oh, you don't even know the half of it. How would you like to babysit these spirits all day? Always, please don't let me be dead, or please let me across for free. I haven't had a pay raise in 3,000 years. Do you imagine suits like this come cheap? You deserve better, I agree. A little appreciation, respect, and pay. With each word, I stacked another gold coin on the counter. Charon glanced down at his silk Italian jacket, as if imagining himself in something even better. I must say, lad, you're making some sense now, just a little. I stacked another few coins. I could mention a pay raise while I'm talking to Hades. He sighed. The boat's almost full anyway. Might as well add you 3 and be off. He stood, scooped up our money, and said, Come along. We pushed through the crowd of waiting spirits who grabbed at their clothes like the wind, their voices whispering things I couldn't make out. Charon shoved them out of the way, grumbling, freeloaders. He escorted us into the elevator, which was already crowded with souls of the dead, each one holding a green boarding pass. Charon grabbed 2 spirits who were trying to get on with us and pushed them back in the lobby. Right. Now, no one get any ideas while I'm gone, he announced to the waiting room. And if anyone moves the dial off my easy listening station again, I'll make sure you're here for another 1,000 years. Understand? He shuts the doors and puts a key card in the slot into the elevator panel when we start to descend. What happens to the spirits waiting in the lobby? Annabeth asks. Nothing, Charon says. For how long? Forever, until I'm feeling generous. Oh, she said. That's fair. Charon raised an eyebrow. Whoever said death was fair, young miss? Wait till it's your turn. You'll die soon enough where you're going. We'll get out alive, I said. Ha! I got a sudden dizzy feeling. We weren't going down anymore, but forward. The air turned misty. Spirits around me started changing shape. Their modern clothes flickered into gray hooded robes. The floor of the elevator began swaying. I blinked hard. When I closed my eyes, Charon's creamy Italian suit had been replaced by a long black robe. His tortoiseshell glasses were gone. Where his eyes should have been were empty sockets like Ares' eyes, except Charon's were totally dark, full of night, death, and despair. He saw me looking and said, Well? Nothing, I managed. I thought he was grinning, but that wasn't it. The flesh of his face was becoming transparent, letting me see straight through his skull. The floor kept swaying. Grover said, I think I'm getting seasick. When I blinked again, the elevator wasn't an elevator more. We were standing in a wooden barge. Charon was pulling us across a dark, oily river, swirling with bones, dead fish, and other strange things, plastic dolls, crushed carnations, soggy diplomas with gilt edges. The river sticks, Annabeth murmured. It's so polluted, Charon said. For thousands of years you humans have been throwing everything you have come across, hopes, dreams, wishes that never came true. Irresponsible waste management, if you ask me. Mist cleared off the back of the filthy water. Above us, almost lost in the gloom, was a ceiling of stalactites. Ahead, the far shore glimmered with greenish light in the color of poison. Panic closed up my throat. What am I doing here? These people around me? They're dead. Annabeth grabbed hold of my hand. Under normal circumstances, this would have embarrassed me, but I understood how she felt. She wanted reassurance that somebody else was alive on this boat. I found myself muttering a prayer, though I wasn't quite sure who I was praying to. Down here only one God mattered, and he was the one I'd come to confront. The shoreline of the underworld came into view. Craggly rocks and black volcanic sand stretched inland about 100 yards to the base of the high stone wall, which marched off in either direction as far as we could see. A sound came from somewhere nearby in the green gloom, echoing off the stones like the howl of a large animal. "Old Three-Face is hungry," Charon said. His smile turned skeletal in the greenish light. "Bad luck for you godlings." The bottom of our boat slid into the black sand. The dead began to disembark. A woman holding a little girl's hand. An old man and an old woman hobbling along arm in arm. A boy no little older than I was, shuffling silently along his gray robe. Charon said, "I'd wish you luck, mate, but there isn't any down here. Mind you don't forget to mention my pay raise." He counted our gold coins into his pouch, and then took up his pole. He warbled something that sounded like Barry Milano's song as he ferried the empty barge across the river. We followed the spirits up the well-worn path. I'm not sure what I was expecting. Pearly gates, or big black portcullis or something, but the entrance to the underworld looked like a cross between airport security and the Jersey Turnpike. There were 3 separate entrances under one huge black archway that said, "You are now entering Erebus." Each entrance had the pass-through metal detectors with security cameras mounted on top. Beyond this were the toll booths manned by the black-robed ghouls like Charon. The howling of the hungry animals was really loud now, but I couldn't see where it was coming from. The 3-headed dog, Cerberus, who was supposed to guard Hades' door, was nowhere to be seen. The dead queued up into 3 lines. 2 marked "Attendant on duty," 1 marked "Easy Death." Easy Death line was moving right along. The other 2 were crawling. "What do you figure?" I asked Annabeth. "The fast line must go straight to Asphodel's Fields," she said. "No contest. They don't want to risk judgment from the court, because it might go against them." "There's a court for dead people?" "Yeah, 3 judges. They switch around who sits on the bench. King Minos, Thomas Jefferson, Shakespeare, people like that. Sometimes they look at life and decide that person needs special reward, like the field of Elysium. Sometimes they decide on punishment. For most people, well, they just lived. Nothing special, good or bad. So they go to Asphodel's Fields." "And do what?" Grover said. "Imagine standing in a wheat field in Kansas forever." "Harsh," I said. "Not as harsh as that," Grover muttered. "Look." A couple of black-robed ghouls had pulled aside one spirit and were frisking him at the security desk. The face of the dead man looked vaguely familiar. "He's that preacher who made the news, remember?" Grover asked. "Oh yeah, I did remember now. We'd seen him on the TV a couple times at the Yancey Academy dorm. He was this annoying televangelicist from upstate New York who raised millions of dollars for orphanages and then got caught spending the money on stuff for his mansion, like gold-plated toilet seats, an indoor putt-putt golf course. He died in a police chase when his Lamborghini for the Lord went off a cliff." I said, "What are they going to do to him?" "Special punishment from Hades," Grover guessed. "The really bad people get personal attention as soon as they arrive. The kindly ones will set up an eternal torture hour for him." I thought of the furries made me shudder. I realized I was in their home territory now. Old Mrs. Dodds would be licking her lips with anticipation. "But if he's a preacher," I said, "and he believes in a different hell." Grover shrugged. "Who says he's seeing the place that we are seeing it? Humans see what they want to see. You're very stubborn or persistent that way." We got close to the gates. The howling was so loud now, it shook the ground at my feet, but I still couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Then about 50 feet in front of us, the green mist shimmered. Standing just where the path split into 3 lanes was an enormous, shadowy monster. I hadn't seen it before because it was half transparent like the dead, until it moved, blended with whatever was behind. Only its eyes and teeth looked solid, and then it was staring straight at me. My jaw hung open. All I could say was, "He's a Rottweiler." I'd always imagined Cerberus as a big black mastiff, but he was obviously a purebred Rottweiler, except of course he was half the size of a woolly mammoth, mostly invisible, and 3 heads. The dad walked right up to him, no fear at all. The attendant on duty lines parted on either side of him. The easy death spirits walked right before his front paws and under his belly, which they could do without even crouching. "I'm starting to see him better," I muttered. "Why is that?" "I think," Annabeth moistened her lips, "I'm afraid it's because we're getting closer to being dead." The dog's middle head craned towards us. It sniffed the air and growled. "It can smell the living," I said. "That's okay," Grover said, trembling next to me, "because we have a plan." "Right," Annabeth said. I never heard her voice sound quite so small. A plan. We moved towards the monster. The middle head snarled at us, then barked so loud my eyeballs rattled. "Can you understand it?" I asked Grover. "Oh yeah," he said. "I can understand it." "What's it saying?" "I don't think humans have 4-letter words that translate that easy." I took the big stick out of my backpack, a post I'd broken off Krusty's Safari Deluxe floor model. I held it up and tried to channel happy dog thoughts toward Cerberus Alpo commercials. Cute little puppies, fire hydrants. I tried to smile, like I wasn't about to die. "Hey, big fella," I called up. "I bet they don't play with you much." "Oh." "Good boy," I said weakly. I waved the stick. The dog's middle head followed the movement. The other 2 heads trained their eyes on me, completely ignoring the spirits. I had Cerberus's undivided attention. I wasn't sure that was a good thing. "Fetch." I threw a stick into the gloom, a good solid throw. I heard it go kersploosh in the river Styx. Cerberus glared at me unimpressed. His eyes were baleful and cold. "So much for that plan." Cerberus was now making a new kind of growl, deeper in his 3 throats. Grover said, "Percy?" "Yeah?" "I just thought you'd want to know." "Yeah." "Cerberus, he says we got 10 seconds to pray to the god of our choice. After that, he's hungry." "Wait," Annabeth said. She had rifling through her back. Uh-oh, I thought. 5 seconds, Grover said. "Do we run now?" Annabeth produced a red rubber ball the size of a grapefruit. It was labeled Waterland, Denver, Colorado. Before I could stop her, she raised the ball and marched straight up to Cerberus. She shouted, "You see the ball? You want the ball, Cerberus? Sit." Cerberus looked stunned as we were. All 3 of his heads were cocked sideways. 6 nostrils dilated. "Sit," Annabeth called again. I was sure that any moment she would become the world's largest milk-bone dog biscuit, but instead Cerberus licked his 3 sets of lips, shifted on his haunches, and sat, immediately crushing a dozen spirits who passed underneath him in the easy death line. The spirits made a muffled hisses as they dissipated, like the air let out of the tires. Annabeth said, "Good boy." She threw Cerberus the ball. He caught it middle mouth, and it was barely big enough for him to chew. The other head started snapping at the middle, trying to get the new toy. "Drop it," Annabeth ordered. Cerberus's head stopped fighting and looked at her. The ball was wedged between 2 of his teeth like a tiny piece of gum. He emitted a loud, scary whimper, then dropped the ball, now slimy and bitten nearly in half at Annabeth's feet. "Good boy." She picked up the ball, ignoring the monster, and spit all over it. She turned toward us. "Go now. Easy death line. It's faster," I said. "But now," she ordered in the same tone she was using with the dog. Grover and I inched warily. Cerberus started growling. "Stay," Annabeth ordered the monster. "If you want the ball, stay." Cerberus whimpered, but he stayed where he was. "What about you?" I asked Annabeth as we passed her. "I know what I'm doing, Percy," she muttered. "At least I'm pretty sure." Grover and I walked between the monster's legs.